To another episode of Bourbon with a Taste of Military History. I'm your host, Clem Papanow, and I'm glad to see you guys again. I have a special treat for you guys. You know, I have two new friends with me today, unlike the last time I had two guy friends. So we're trying to even it out and be play the playing field correctly, and to have two females come in. But we're also going to do a couple different things today. We're going to do two different bourbons. I mean, same distillery, but two different bourbons, which we've never done before. We've always just done one. And then we're also going to really talk about and get more personal about the military history part of the tasting. Because, I love bourbon, but, my passion is military history. So I really care about the military history part, probably a little bit more than the bourbon. I can drink bourbon anytime. But, so we just incorporate military history and bourbon together. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about today Devils River Bourbon. But before we get to the bourbon, let's meet our guests.
I'll go first. Hi, I'm Beth. I met Clem through my job, and I annoy him every day. And he pops into my office and makes sure that I'm working. So it's always a lot of fun, and I'm excited to chat today.
All right.
I'm Mallory. I also met Clem through work. And we used to, have very intense discussions about our fashion choices at work. So
That's correct. One of the things that got started about meeting these two about it, and of course, and Tori's not here, but they helped me with my Instagram page because, I'm not good with all that kind of stuff, but they helped me, and that's what got us all talking about bourbon and about all kinds of different stuff like that, and that's how come we got them and we invited them here. So what we're going to talk to today is about Devils River, which is a small distillery out of Texas. And they have three different bourbons. We have two of them here today. So recently, it's kind of funny. It's really kind of a funny story, really. I mean, when we talked about doing this, I went up to where my bourbon was, and I was trying to figure out, what can I pair with what we're going to talk about, the battle we're going to talk about. And I just wasn't finding anything. And I said, you know what? Raiders, Rangers, World War II, Devils River. I saw it and I grabbed it and I said, we'll talk about that. Even though it's it probably has nothing to do with World War II, but it just seemed like when you're talking about macho military guys, this seemed to catch at me. So I pulled the bottle of Devils River that I had, which I bought at Lake Liquor here in Maumelle, and I was going to do that, but lo and behold, on Facebook and a newsletter, because I subscribe to a newsletter from 107 Liquor in Sherwood on Keel Avenue, they said they were having a tasting with the guys from Devils River.
Wow.
And I said, holy cow, that worked out great. So I went over there and met a guy named Andy from the distillery. He's their rep for Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And we got to talking, and he gave me these handy little cards. But before we get to the actual tasting of the bourbon, I really wanted to talk about where it came from because he thought that was pretty important, and it kind of is a history thing. So the Devils River is a river in northwest Texas, northwest of San Antonio, and it was originally called the San Pedro River. But in 1840, a Texas Ranger by the name of Captain John Coffee Hayes was coming back from a mission, and he popped up over this ridge, and he saw where the confluence of all these rivers going to one spot, 6 different rivers, and they were just churning up and waterfalls and all that, and he goes, that's not the San Pedro, that's the Devil's thing. So the river took a new name called Devils River. So that was pretty cool about that, I thought. And John Coffee Hayes, I did a little bit about him. He is a very well-known Texas Ranger, fought in 14 different engagements with the Rangers, was a huge hero. He eventually retired and moved to California, and he later died in California. So I thought that was pretty cool. Another cool thing about the bourbon is that Kentucky bourbon, why is Kentucky bourbon famous? Why is bourbon Kentucky?
it's grown in with their soil and
It has a lot,
their
right?
minerals.
It has a lot to do with the way the water, what the water sifts or goes through. You know what it is?
No.
Okay, well, that's okay. I mean, you probably have to be. It's limestone. Kentucky's known for the rock, the type is limestone. So when you drink Kentucky bourbon, you know you're getting that limestone water has been sifted and and gone over the limestone. And in fact, we talked about it the last bourbon tasting I did, that you can buy limestone water from Kentucky.
Oh, interesting.
And I did one time. I bought it on Amazon. It's fairly expensive. I mean, it's not cheap water. But you know what? When you mix the limestone water with the bourbon, it totally explodes the bourbon to a different taste. I mean, it's more so than just plain old water, which we're going to use today. But I mean, it just changes it completely. And the Devils River runs through limestone, because Texas is a huge limestone state. So there's going to be a lot of similarities between the Devils River bourbon and just regular bourbon from Kentucky, because they're done this pretty much the same way. So let's pour a little bit, and we'll talk about this, and then we'll taste it, and we'll talk about it. Now, I know it may seem like you're gonna, but we're not gonna drink all this.
Okay.
We're gonna use it in a couple different things, so don't worry about it. I may drink all of it, but you don't have to. We can figure out.
We got work tomorrow. So.
Yeah, so do I. No, I don't. I'm driving tomorrow.
Where are you going?
I'm going to Upper Michigan. I'm going home. Taking my dad. I'm going up north.
Northern accent.
Going to up north. Okay, so with this, right here, I got my card that Andy gave me. So these are the famous Glengarry smelling glasses.
Okay.
So these glasses, just to let you both know, are designed to keep the bourbon in a small spot and then let it come out and explode into your nose. So if you smell, and we've talked about this before, I have no sense of smell with wine, bourbon, or anything. So, all I ever smell is just some things. But you may have a better nose for it, and you might tell me what you're smelling. So the way we start out with is we smell it first.
One question. So we both drink a lot of wine,
Right.
and so
Sure.
we look for certain things like fruits and spices.
Right, and the
so is that
exact
similar
same thing with bourbon.
bourbons?
Yes, exactly the same thing with bourbon. They use a lot of fruit, they use spices, they use peppers. It depends on the bourbon, depends on the distiller, how he does it. So,
Does it
see,
smell
because
like
I'm
spicy?
smelling something in there, but me personally, I don't know what that is.
It smells a little almondy.
Like almondy?
Yeah.
You smell that?
Yeah, a little.
Almondy?
Big whiff.
Okay, so the color, according to them, is rich, deep caramel color, and that is.
Yeah,
I
that's
see
pretty
that.
accurate.
Yep. And the nose, here's where we go. You're both wrong.
Oh,
well,
that's a
shocking.
shocker.
Yeah. And I didn't try because I knew I would be wrong. So it's light and peppery with a hint of ripe fruit, vanilla, and nutmeg.
Oh.
Maybe. I don't know if vanilla. No, that's a little
Nutmeg,
stretch.
I can
almond,
see that.
that's kind of,
Spicy.
yeah, you can go that far if you want to, but it's not going to work.
Trying to make it happen.
Okay, so now that we've smelled it and none of us got it correct, the first sip is supposed to be bold, followed by an oak, honey, and caramel medley. It finishes smooth with a warm, sweet flavor. So let's see what it does. Now, I don't know what nutmeg tastes like, but I can taste spice a little bit in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely spicy.
And I really like the way that it hit me in the mouth, and then I get a little bit in the back of the throat.
Kind of like.
You feel it going down a little
Yeah,
bit?
Yeah.
going down.
Good, so that's what we call a hug.
How kind.
You're getting a little
So
hug
sweet.
right now from it. And
warm.
and some bourbons will, hit you there, hit you here, and hit you here. So, this one doesn't do that, but it doesn't overpower.
No.
Are you burning?
No,
just pure
no,
alcohol.
Just
You're not.
kind
It's
of.
not.
It's warm.
It's
Yeah, it's
warm,
warm, nice,
hug.
smooth.
Hug is
Yeah,
accurate.
yeah. So,
I kind of get the caramel.
Yeah, a little bit.
yeah, I like that.
it. That's good.
Yep, that's good stuff. All right, good deal. Okay, so where we usually go from here then is the Clem test.
The Clem test. Okay.
Okay,
What's the
because
Clem
I
test?
like my bourbon with water.
Okay.
Some with a lot of water, some with a little water. But I want to see, and it's always experiment this way. So what I do is I put a ice cube in each one of your glasses, and then we just pour it in there over the ice.
These are fancy ice cubes.
Yeah, they
love
are
this-
fancy ice
They're
cubes.
bourbon cubes.
Yeah, pour it all in there because we're going to drink some of the other stuff.
Keeps it from diluting,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it does,
Or helps.
but it keeps it from diluting quickly. So we'll just let it sit here for a second.
Okay.
And went over the ice, and it's already should have been opened already. So then,
Is it cup?
yep, you can. Okay, so here's where this thing is. So some people will tell you to only have these glasses to smell bourbon, but I always tell them that you don't have to. You can smell just as well out of a tumbler. See, I think it smells completely different.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm smelling, but I smell a little bit more, not a fruity type thing, but like a sweet
It's not
thing.
as strong,
Yeah,
pungent,
right.
spicy.
Right. Oh, see, I mean, it's a totally different taste. You don't get that burn in the beginning. You get a little bit of hug in the back.
Doesn't do, yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
as
but it
like
kind of
strong
calmed it down. It kind of
Yeah.
calmed it down.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only 90 proof, so it's not bad. Yeah, that's not bad. All right, good deal. All right, so the best part is coming up. So what we're here now to talk about is we're going to talk about a little bit of military history. And before we go into the actual battle that we're going to talk about, and actually what we're going to talk about today is this. We're going to talk about the invasion of Sicily in World War II by the 1st Battalion Marine Raiders, Darby's Raiders. But specifically we're going to talk about their landing at a small town in Sicily called Gela on
The early morning hours of July 10th, 1943.
Did we not have that rehearsed correctly? So yes, that's when it happened. So Beth, this is your story.
Yes.
So why don't you lead us into the battle?
Okay, so when we talked about doing this, Clem mentioned some battle that he had in mind, and I thought it would be a lot more interesting if we talked about maybe a little something more personal. My grandfather actually won a Silver Star in World War II. He was a Derby Ranger, and so he won the Silver Star at the invasion of Sicily, specifically the Battle of Gela. We had this rehearsed.
We did. We talked about
We
that.
did.
Prepped him.
He was like, don't get this wrong. So my grandpa was actually Steve Yambor. He was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, and he enlisted in the Army right after he turned 18 years old. He was actually what was called a Derby Ranger. So I think they were primarily stationed in North Africa for a lot of the time. And Clem actually told me, which I thought was really interesting, is that Darby, what's his first name?
I don't even
Whoever
remember.
Darby is, was actually born in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Right.
Which was super interesting to me because my family doesn't really have any Arkansas ties. My parents moved down here for a job, and our family lives elsewhere. So I thought it was kind of interesting that he was a Derby Ranger and Darby was from Arkansas.
Right, if you go to Fort Smith, there's schools named after him, there's statues there, there's a museum for him there. General Darby was a huge influence and being born and raised in Fort Smith.
Yes, so I believe that once they were able to have some battles in North Africa, they took North Africa, and then they moved from North Africa over to Sicily.
Correct.
And they specifically, I guess what I said was that Sicily was kind of D-Day before D-Day happened. So they stormed the beaches of Gela. They had a specific, task. Each platoon or whatever they were called had a specific task to take out 2 machine gun positions. And so my grandfather, I actually read a story, I guess one of his fellow people. Soldiers, yes. One of his fellow soldiers, when he learned that my grandfather passed away several years ago, wrote the story of what happened. And it was really interesting. We actually read it earlier before we did this. And it was really interesting just to see his perspective on it. But when they got onto the beach, they were being held down by this machine gunner. And one section was able to take out the right machine gunner, but the left they couldn't get to it. It was at a very precarious spot. It was covered by, I guess it was like a cement pillbox.
There you go.
And there were only a couple little strips where they could
Slots.
be shooting from. And so they couldn't get up there, and they were being held down by the machine fire. And they were just getting very overwhelmed. They didn't know how they were going to get out of the situation. More of the Allied troops were coming onto the beach and didn't realize that they were still up there, and they were shooting towards the machine gun fire. So they were receiving fire from all sides. And they were like, what are we going to do? And then one of them was about to shoot a bazooka towards the pillbox, and they said, no, wait, don't do it. Yambor's up there. Yambor's up there. Don't shoot up there. And so the next thing they knew, there was an explosion, and he had thrown, I guess, I thought it was a satchel charge, but Clem says it was
A grenade.
a grenade. He threw one grenade in there, it exploded, and he threw another grenade for good measure. So he was able to take out that machine gun, and I believe the guy who wrote the story said, and then he stood up and was like silhouetted in the dark and was like, "Come on, guys," and then just
Exactly
never
right.
mentioned it. So that's how he won his Silver Star. He went on to fight in World War II. He won several other medals, including a Purple Heart. And he unfortunately died before I was born, so I never got to meet him. But he sounded like he was a really awesome guy. He met my grandma right after World War II. She was pretty awesome as well. She was a captain in the Army. She was a nurse. And one interesting fact about her was that after the Allied powers won World War II, she actually had to stay in Poland, and when they were infiltrating the concentration camps, she was there to kind of translate for the prisoners in the concentration camp because she spoke Polish, and she also treated them. So my mom remembers her telling stories about how she made contact with these people and how terrible it was, and how she was able to kind of nurse them back to health and translate for them, which I thought was really amazing.
That's awesome.
That was cool. So, I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, I spent 37 years in the military and fought in Iraq. But, I mean, her grandfather is what we would call a major stud. I mean, dude, single-handedly, let me tell you a little bit, preface a little bit what's coming up onto it. So the Battle of Sicily, or the invasion of Sicily, was after the U.S. military had completed a complete cleaning and takeover of Northern Africa in Operation Torch. So going into Sicily was, I mean, so if you watch the movie Patton, it really explains it well, why they had to do it and what they were going on. But all of this was the result of a conference in Malta between Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And the biggest thing that came out of that, and we talked about this, Beth, the biggest thing that came out of that was that the Russians were getting their butts stomped by the Germans on the Eastern Front. And Germany, because it had had such an easy time in Europe, you know, taking over all of Europe, they were moving and concentrating the bulk of their military into Russia. Hitler hated the Russians, and he wanted to just annihilate them. So he was moving everything he had into the Eastern Front, trying to take Russia. And Stalin was pressuring the Allies, you know, which he was one of them, both Roosevelt and Churchill, and said, you know, guys, you need to give me a break here. So the only way to give them a break would be to open a new front. So the whole plan was eventually to invade Europe through, across the English Channel. But they had to get the American troops ready for it. The first thing they had to do was, they invaded North Africa. They wanted to make sure they could do what they wanted to do, that the troops were, acclimated to fighting, because they had not fought. Everybody else had been fighting for years. I mean, we didn't invade until 42, 43. So that was why we went into Africa first.
Wasn't Africa a little bit of a struggle?
It was, and the reason why Africa was not supposed to be a struggle, Africa was supposed to be pretty easy, because it was being occupied by, French troops and Moroccans and other folks that were, and Italians. Not a whole lot of Germans were there at the time, but it was basically, intelligence said that we would have an easy time. Because we would land, and all those French soldiers, the Vichy French they call them, and all those, and would just surrender to us because they really didn't want to fight anyway. They were just there because they were told to be there. Unbeknownst to the Americans, Hitler kind of foresaw, that we were going to do that, so he sent his #1 general to Africa, Rommel, the #1 guy, and he gave us a fit. They because they called him the Desert Fox. He gave us a fit there. He gave the British a fit, he gave the Americans a fit, because he was so good. And because their equipment was superior to ours at the time. But eventually we were able to overwhelm them with sheer numbers. Our air superiority took over, our shipping took over, and we were able to go ahead and move him out of there. And then they recalled Rommel and a lot of his forces into Italy and to France. So the next place for us to go because the invasion of Normandy, of Europe, was not quite yet ready. So they had all these soldiers, they had all this equipment, and they said, let's try something new. Let's try this amphibious landing, which we've never done before. We've never used the LSTs before. We've never used this. We didn't use this. All kinds of new equipment was incorporated into the invasion of Sicily.
One
Yeah.
big trial run.
Yeah.
Very serious
I mean,
trial.
so yeah, the big problem was though, is that the air superiority, air cover, the airplanes. The Germans and the Italians, you don't hear a lot about the Italians in World War II, but they had a really strong military at the time. Mussolini was he had visions of taking over all of Africa, and he had built his military up, not quite as strong as the Germans, but I mean, they were a well-trained, well-supplied force. And we were trying to fly our military. We had no air bases anywhere except for Africa. It's a long flight, and fuel was a problem, getting to Sicily. So we could not maintain air cover there as well as the Germans and the Italians could, because they were just flying from Italy. Yeah, so that kind of messed things up. And that kind of hurt your grandfather a little bit, because even after they were able to take they were on the east side of in Gela, there was a causeway, which is where they wanted to unload the ships. And that was the Raiders' main target, was to secure, without destroying, this pier. So all the ships could come up to it, unload, and dock and all that. And they were able to do that, but I mean, they had to fight these airplanes for quite a bit. The other cool thing that I wanted to get into, well, your grandfather's group, was after they secured the pier, they were to move inland. But the Italian army had decided to regroup, and they decided to attack, what we call a counterattack. And they came from 3 ways. And they had tanks. We did not have tanks ashore yet. They had tanks. But what happened was the Raiders were so good at calling in artillery support, they would call artillery in from the ships.
Oh wow.
That were 3 miles out, and they were 7 miles in. And there's a story where the Raiders called in a strike on 3 individual tanks that were giving them crap.
Oh wow. That's
And the
impressive.
USS Savannah, the ship, was able to shoot from that far out with their naval guns and destroy
And
those
actually,
3 tanks.
That's impressive.
I mean, it's pretty darn
Yeah,
cool. I mean,
yeah.
for 1943, 42,
To be
I mean, to be
accurate.
able to be that accurate, oh yeah, I mean, it's incredible. But the Raiders were able to stop that, and they disseminated the Italian army, and the Raiders themselves took 400 prisoners that day.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, a pretty cool battle. The U.S. eventually won in Sicily. If you watch Patton, one of my favorite commanders of all time, you'll hear about the rivalry between him and the British General Montgomery about who was going to take Sicily first. Of course, Patton won. And then, of course, they moved into Italy after that, and the war got much tougher for the American army in Italy. Italy was a much tougher nut to crack. So, pretty cool. What we are going to do is Beth has brought pictures and some stuff, and we're going to take some shots of those, and we're going to include them so you can see her grandfather and her grandmother and some other things. Because I'm telling you guys, and I know we're going a little bit long, but that's okay. This guy was incredible. There are so many stories, including my own father-in-law. There's so many stories about these guys in World War II and the incredible acts of heroism that they committed. I mean, young kids, 18, 19-year-old kids, just out there fighting in World War II, just doing these incredible acts, and it just blows me away to even talk about them some of the time. And that's probably why I became a military historian, because I just love those kind of stories. So, here's where we're going next.
All right.
Before we go
Let's-
that, so all of y'all know we've talked about this before. I have this huge military history library, 5,000 to 6,000 books.
It's very impressive.
And I'm going to show you guys my library here in a little bit.
I'm here for the bourbon.
Yeah, just keep, please keep drinking. Please keep drinking, because we're not done yet. So, so I'm looking, and I know that I have books on Sicily, and I know I have books on that invasion, and I am going through my library, and I can't find crap in there. So I finally found a book, and I always like to tell you guys about a book when we're done with the battle. And so what I did find was, it's not the best, But this is pretty good series, really. It's it's a campaign books, and this battle is Sicley's Whose Victory is the only one I was able to find. Ballantyne did this series back in the '60s, I think, and they did a whole list of books on this. So these are fairly good books for beginners if you want to get into World War II, Vietnam even, and other battles. Ballantyne published these books a long time ago, and I have a whole collection of them. So I pulled this one on Sicley. Please go to their website, look for them in your library, order them on eBay, Amazon, whatever you order your books from. You can't go wrong. They're a great primer book for you, and I wish that I could have found a better Sicley book. What really amazed me about looking for this is I have the Army Green Books. And I'm going to show you the Green Books here in a minute. There's a series that the Army put out. And I could have sworn that there was a Green Book on the Battle of Sicily. And I looked in my Green Books and they do not even talk about the North Africa or Sicily. So there must be a different series that that I've got to figure out. So that's why I didn't have a Green Book on this. But Sicley's Whose Victory? It's written by Martin Bloomerson. So if you can get it, please do. I think you'd enjoy it. So what I really like to do now is try the next bourbon.
Okay.
Let's
This
go.
is a strong one.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay,
dear.
so to be honest with you, at $35, guys, this is an incredible bourbon. So I already tried it at the store, and if you can see, since I'm not peeling off the wrapper, that I've already tried it since I've been home. So this is 117 proof.
Ooh.
So yeah, it's gonna be a little bit more than you're probably used to, and that's okay. We were talking about this with my other guys that were here last time. I've developed, I guess I drink enough bourbon that I've developed a little bit more tolerance to my bourbon, and I like the bourbon 100 proof or better because I think it tastes better. So, so this is their barrel strength bourbon. It's got 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% barley. Now,
It
see,
smells sweet.
it smells
Yeah.
different than the other one.
It smells sweeter.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it
it's
does
more
smell sweet. I'm
fruity.
smelling
Is it more
something
fruity?
there. Well, I'm
I don't
smelling
know.
something. Is that what you're smelling? Fruit?
I can't decide, but I think so.
So let's talk. The nose, it says distinct notes for the nose: pepper, oak, and rye.
We were way off.
I don't smell. Maybe the oak is what I'm smelling. I don't smell pepper or rye.
I don't smell pepper for sure.
Okay. The color is dark amber. I think it's dark, definitely darker than the other one, not as copper color. And the taste, let's see here.
It smells so.
Yeah. Ooh. Holy cow.
It was not as bad
Feel
as
that,
I thought
don't
it
you?
I like yeah,
Why are your eyes watering?
because my contacts are.
that right there really
It's
bits.
actually a
one's
little
it-
bit smoother.
But
It
it
is
bites on you,
smoother,
yeah,
really.
but
You can
it
taste
hits
it
you.
like in the top of your mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, like right before you hit the back of the throat.
It kind of tastes it in
That
the top.
little-
It's weird. It's weird. You don't taste it
Yeah.
down on the lip, on the tongue or that. I taste it on the top of my mouth.
Yeah.
So it's got a bold, smooth taste that develops on the palate with strong hints of oak, honey, caramel, followed by some peppery spice.
I taste the honey.
What does oak taste like?
We
I
just
wish
used it as a word.
You know,
Let's
there-
throw that out there, but I don't.
there
think it
are
ever tastes
bourbons that you can taste the wood in the bourbon. You can actually taste it.
like. Okay.
This not so
That's
much so, because all bourbon is pretty much, all bourbon should be aged in oak
wood,
barrels.
yeah.
Yeah, so you should be able to get a little bit of that wood taste, in it. And some bourbons are a little bit stronger than others. So yeah, I'm still feeling that.
Yeah, I can feel it in my the
Definitely
burn.
down. It's like kind of going
Yeah.
a little further down.
So
but
that's
not
pretty
as
good.
much.
All right, so we're at the time where my cameraman says we are going over. So this is a little bit longer than normal, but that's fine. There's no time limit on these things. If you're having a good time and you're drinking bourbon and talking military history, we could go on for hours if we thought our viewership would like that. We don't think they like that. So, any last comments, Beth?
I don't think so. This has been a lot of fun though.
So tell me, what do you think about the bourbon?
I like it. I'm excited.
I mean, I'm empty and you guys are full.
Well, see, I was promised. I've been holding out. I was promised a view at the Bourbon Library.
Oh yeah, we're gonna go
take
look.
it.
We're gonna
So
drink some more
so-
bourbon upstairs.
Yes.
You know, here in a minute. But so
It was fun. I liked it. I'm gonna come back.
Thanks
Hey.
for having us.
yes. Any last comments from you?
No, loved it. We'll have to come back maybe.
Right.
and
Yes.
tell
Please
stories,
come
so-
back,
Yes.
and we'll talk about something different. I really want to thank you, especially for your grandfather. Gosh, I wish I could have met him. But I mean, be able to see his pictures, know that he got a medal. Talk about the Battle of Gela, which he actually earned the other Silver Star. The other thing we didn't talk about was not only did he earn the Silver Star, he received the Battlefield Commission at the same time. So he was promoted from sergeant to second lieutenant, and he finished the war as an officer. And that's pretty incredible because they just didn't hand out commissions to anybody. So, with all that being said, hey, thank you once again for coming and watching my channel. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave some comments, like, subscribe, pass it on to your friends. Trying to make millions and millions of customers so I can get free bourbon.
Follow his Instagram account.
Yeah, follow my
Yes.
Instagram account, follow my Facebook, follow everything, Twitter, and all that. So, with that being said, thank you. And
Wrong.
please
Sorry.
keep drinking bourbon.